For us, the biggest change occurred on that Saturday when the storm intensified very, very rapidly, and it went from just I think a Category 2 hurricane all the way up to a Category 4.
We respond up until conditions deteriorate to the point where it's not safe for us to respond.
As the day went on, the weather got progressively worse, and that's when water started to come into the building.
I mean, there was lots of noises you're not used to hearing, which, it's very loud and kind of upsets you.
It seemed like it was over us for an extended period of time, and the amount of wind that was coming on shore was just relentless.
At one point, the building was shaking, was shaking so badly. I told Mike, I said, we were on the 4th floor at the time. I said, you think we need to go downstairs? And he said probably the best thing I had heard throughout the whole event. He said, if this building collapses, do you really want to be at the bottom?
The wind was getting up into the 120 mile an hour range at some point during the thing, and those windows were screaming, literally screaming. You couldn't concentrate on what you were doing. All you heard was those windows.
I was a little concerned about how far it would come and whether or not it would impact, how much of the city would impact, and to what extent we would see any type of rise in water.
It started coming in through the stairwells, which you would think would be the strongest part of the building, but they have skylights at the top of it, so the water, even in a normal thunderstorm, water would come into those skylights, but it was almost, it was a torrent.
The stairwell was full of water.
I was upstairs on the 4th floor just watching it, and that's when I noticed I hadn't seen Mike in about 15 minutes, and I thought, I wonder where Mike is.
When I went outside to look for the hot spot, I didn't realize that the storm had somehow killed the power to that outside door, and when I tried to get back in, there was no electricity going through the door, so the card swipe wouldn't work. And when I tried to pry it open, it was so wet from the storm, and with the actual winds blowing into that area anyway, it was very hard to move the door.
So I decided to go look for him. I don't know what something said, go look for him. So I went down to the 3rd floor, and then the 2nd floor, and then the 1st floor. And when I got to the 1st floor was pretty much flooded at that point, probably about 2 to 3 inches of water, except for one corner of it. And I looked to the right, which would have been the back door of the building, and I looked and I didn't see anything.
So I decided to go around the building to the other side to try that door. And while I was walking around the buildings, the wind was so bad that I ended up having to grab each of the parking spot poles, because I'm a 330-pound guy, and it was pulling me like I was a skateboard with nothing on it.
And I looked and I saw this silhouette outside, and because it was dark, and then Mike is just knocking on the door, so I ran over to the door because I realized he had been stuck outside.
Finally got to the back door, and that door would not open either, so I stood in the corner, just kind of huddled up facing the wall.
It took both of us to pry the doors open because the wind was so strong, just to get them in.
And then at some point, Leon came downstairs and just kind of noticed me in the corner and came open the door, and I was freezing my butt off.
So he was out there for, 10, 15 minutes, and at that point, at least 120 miles an hour, sustained winds. It was beating him up bad.
Holy crap.
At the time the incident was reported to us, our phone lines are still up, so 911 is still up, and we received about 17 calls, 18 calls, somewhere 20 calls of reports of fire. At the time it was reported, I think we had sustained winds of about 80 miles an hour. And at the last gust we had registered at the EOC here was around 112 miles an hour, which is, the wind in and of itself is totally ineffective for any type of water flow, because you know the wind speed will substantially misdirect a water stream. With no water pressure, we had to resort to an alternative means of water supply. And the guys did a great job of locating one. It was a loading dock for one of the buildings where the water just pooled, and they were able to draft and shelter water. It wasn't on the site of the fire, but it was away from the fire, and they did a great job of preventing any further spread.
I didn't think it was going to be that bad. I mean, I've been through hurricanes before, and that was pretty bad.
I was anticipating a lot of downed trees, a lot of power lines down. It surprised me the amount of debris that we had, as far as the amount of trees and power lines. The amount of power lines down was surprising to me.
The next morning, we went outside right at because I mean, we slept a couple hours maybe, and then as soon as the first light, we went outside to see that the roof had been ripped off of buildings A and B and landed in the tree and on the Greenwald Center behind it.
We ended up going through building B first. Literally as soon as we got the door open, there was the loudest screeching fire alarm I've ever heard. I mean, it literally caused pain. It was so loud. And we went through the buildings. All of building B's first floor, you could tell it had at least 3 or 4 inches of water. I mean, all the computers, the wiring, everything was underwater. I mean, you could see your footprints as you're walking.
No roof. Literally, you can look straight outside.
But as you see, it's a wipeout. Some offices are fine, okay, but the water damage has leaked in. So most of the assistants have problems. The good news is we'll figure this out. We'll rebuild somewhere and move on, or find a new home somewhere.
Well, part of the challenge at that point was find anything, any place. Macy's was at that point unoccupied. Because it was unoccupied, because it had not been occupied in a long time, we had to start trying to put systems back together. The first week we had 3,000 square feet, and we had signage up all over town, and it basically said, you know, no permit required to fix your roof, no permit required to fix your fence, but code is open in City Hall. The city is open in City Hall. If you have any questions, you can drive through. It was literally a drive-through. for now to be able to say that every single city service is happening somewhere.
The amount of damage and damage to our infrastructure, our power infrastructure, was significant. And certainly the amount of wind was concerning.
But the reality of just looking at people's houses, or you're looking at that, this is Katrina without the high water, but it's more wind. So you're worried about the people. We have no water. We have no water pressure. So training kicks in. What's the first thing we got to do? We got to get water and ice.
That's good. That's good. You're good. Keep going all the way to the end. All right, you good.
So a lot of our employees lost everything. And what they do the morning after losing everything is show up at work to help us, help the people of Kenner who've lost everything. So that's, I mean, it can make me cry, but that's one of the joys of what we get to do, because those people, our employees, will help people they don't know.